Vice President of Communications for the Business Council. And she's here. You'll see as we get into the presentation, why we're very interested in working with Yale, with you, is about this issue of communications and climate change. And you'll see as I go through it, okay? So the topic of my presentation is Yale 2030 Transportation Stakeholder Alliance. Now, what is this about? And I just want to make sure. All right. What this is about is from New Haven, 60 minutes to Manhattan. Right now, it's an hour and 5 minutes, the rail trip. And it'll be 30 minutes from Stamford to Manhattan. And Stamford is now 48 to 50 minutes. What we're talking about here is a new economic backbone being created for the state of Connecticut. 30 minutes from Hartford to New Haven by train. 30 minutes from New Haven to Stamford, and then 30 minutes from Stamford to New York. So 60 minutes from New Haven. Now, what is this about? This is an economic development approach. Investment in infrastructure grows the economy. The assumption that we're making is if we're 30 minutes from Stamford to Manhattan, that is a huge economic driver for Stamford. The same thing from New Haven, the same thing from Bridgeport. So you've got to think about this. Is speed on rail an economic driver? We're making that assumption, but we're a business organization. We have real estate developers, bankers, and investors, and we're viewing that this link is extremely important to Manhattan. Manhattan is the job center, growth radiates outward. When we look in New Jersey, when New Jersey cut 12 to 14 minutes off their trip, the Secaucus route, Midtown Direct, it had about a 5 to 7% growth in Grand List around those train stations. That's a huge growth in Grand List with associated job growth. Long Island is looking at a third track on the main line. It's really interesting. Long Island, which has a lot of trains, only has 2-track systems. The New Haven line is a 4-track system. So Long Island is now, it's fascinating, they're going to move, their trains will all go into Penn Station, all of them. East Side Access is a new train station being built under Grand Central. You got to take a look at it. You got to look at it. It's a modern marvel. Underneath, 150 feet down under Grand Central is a whole new station. More than 50% of Long Island's trains will now go into Midtown. All of our trains go into Midtown. Okay? So Long Island is looking at saving 20 minutes each way, so 40 minutes round trip from Long Island into Manhattan. We think that's an enormous economic advantage for Long Island. So what about Connecticut? Connecticut, our trains are actually going 5 to 8 minutes slower over the last 5 years than they have been previously. So we're looking at this as, whoa, this is an economic disadvantage for the New Haven line. And the New Haven line is the single busiest line in America. 38 million rides a year. Single line. Now, Long Island has multiple lines that have more ridership, but single line, New Haven. It's the iconic commuter rail line, right? It's the set for for TV shows. It's not any line, it's the set for. All right. Let me move on. Now, I want to show you here. So I did the economic competitiveness issue. We think this is particularly important for New Haven. So yes, Yale has New Haven, and Yale is a very important part of New Haven, but the president of Yale, as a normal speech, made the point, if I was quicker to Manhattan, it is a huge advantage for Yale, and particularly for New Haven. Because all of a sudden, people can live here and work in Manhattan or vice versa. That's the theory of this. All right? And true for Bridgeport as well. Now, the issue of resiliency. So I want to couple the economic development driver with the issue of resiliency. We'll just put this on note. I chaired the governor's two-storm panel after the 2 storms. What was fascinating is the whole focus at that point after the 2 storms was about recovery. But the issue of resiliency really is just beginning to be looked at. How resilient is your community? So it goes like this. My building's resilient. My supply chain is resilient. But is the community I'm located in resilient? Is its transportation system? system isn't resilient. So resiliency becomes a critical economic competitiveness issue. Got it? So we're matching an economic growth strategy with a resiliency issue, and we're using rail as the vehicle. And I want to just point this out, the issue of climate change and how you communicate it. I think Paul, who put this class together, this is kind of his specialty, and it's why we're so interested in talking to him and to you. How do we communicate the message of climate change? How do we communicate that an investment in rail is both an economic benefit, but also has a resiliency component? And it's tied to the issue of how we begin as a society to react to climate change. It's not so easy. And that's what we think that we could really be looking at. I'll show you why. All right, this is the New Haven line. You see it? It's the Metro North line. I've got New Jersey. I just want to point something out here. So this is Connecticut in red. This is the Harlem line, part of Metro North, and this is the Hudson line. This is the Hudson River, and this is east of the Hudson. I didn't include Long Island. The critical issue is, what is the future of the regional area east of the Hudson River? Okay? And I want to point out, what we don't have on here is there's a new line going up here, it's the Amtrak to Hartford. This line is going to open in another year. This is the biggest new commuter rail line in America that nobody knows about. It goes from Springfield to New Haven. It's a two-track system built to run at 100 miles an hour. They'll probably run it at 80. And nobody knows about this thing. Have any of you heard about it? Nobody. One person.
It's my job.
But it's extraordinary. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars to create this. So what does this all mean to Connecticut and the tri-state area? That means Hartford is an hour from Stanford. That means Hartford is now within the orbit of the New York metropolitan region, not just the Boston region. And then what's the impact on New Haven in particular? Okay? Now, what's the challenge? All right. This is really interesting, this issue of growth. New York City, economic engine. New York City has 8.5 million people in it today. It is zoned for 9 million. 9 million zoned for it. Now, what they're saying here is, under these estimates, by 2040, the historic trend, 2.3 million, Moody's is 1.9, and MTA, we're talking, is 1.1. If you posit that New York City will have 2 million more people, how many jobs does that equate to? 4 million new jobs. Now, let me put a fact in on climate change. If you look at the last storms, 300,000 people had to be evacuated out of New York City. Correct? First time ever. They are now estimating that the Rockaways, that part of Queens, that like JFK, the Rockaways, is not defensible from climate change. That means the potential relocation of 1 million people. Population growth of 2, jobs of 4, 1 million people have to be relocated. Let's say it just changed zoning. So let's think about that. Does New York, as it's currently constructed, have the infrastructure to support this population? Co-op city in the Bronx. How many co-op cities could you build within the borough, within Manhattan's boroughs? I don't think they have the capacity. It's not simply changing zoning. So all of a sudden, the map I showed you before, east of the Hudson, Poughkeepsie, right? Going up to Danbury, that area. Moving out to New Haven and up to Hartford. We are beginning to look at this and we're saying, if this region continue to grow, if there's, how do you do it? Faster train service makes that happen. You can't have an hour and 10 minutes or 110 minutes from New Haven and expect people to commute easily into Manhattan in the numbers you need. But if it's 60 minutes, oh my God, all of a sudden the Poughkeepsies, the peak skills, all of a sudden are manageable. So it opens up more affordable housing, and what fundamentally it does is it reinvigorates ways and gives purpose to older urban areas that were built on manufacturing, like Bridgeport, like New Haven, like Parker, like Meriden. It opens up the center part of east of Hudson River. Okay? Now, I don't know if there's any questions on this. Yes?
I have two questions. One of them is related to what you just touched on. Has the plan taken into consideration potential housing crisis?
Housing.
Yes, because
Yeah.
I mean, there's been so many people. I mean, I'm from the North Dakota area, and because of all the oil, there's an absolute housing crisis in an area that you would never imagine housing crisis to ever have been in
Right.
5 years ago.
Okay.
Does not take that into consideration?
So let's address that question. The question of housing, and housing is a key part of a region's economic competitiveness. We're expensive housing, right? So it limits growth. But if you look at our cities, New Haven, these cities were bigger in population, Bridgeport, years ago, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, than they are today. I mean, Bridgeport's not the state's largest city, 136,000 people. It had almost 190,000 7 years ago. So there's room to grow and to revitalize these cities, the Americans of the world. All these little mill towns, whose population has declined. I mean, young people fled out of these places, right, to get to the big city. But they're there, they have infrastructure, and they're on a rail line. So that's kind of the theory of this. Yeah, okay. Oh, you know.
So, when we're talking, I guess, 2030 was the big on it.
Yeah.
Is that, where did that come from in terms of thinking about this low rise and this whole relocation, I guess, from Rockland
Yeah.
and stuff like that? Have you, where did that take?
I'll tell you where it comes from.
And is it related to kind of forecast?
Where it came out of is we have, the Business Council formed an alliance with the Connecticut Fund for the Environment. It's the first environmental business partnership in the state, built around climate change. And it's a 2030 district. So the 2030 district started in Seattle, so there's 6 of them: Seattle, Los Angeles, Denver, Pittsburgh, Toronto. Stanford is the 6th city. And their goal is by 2030 that the national standards, the GSA standards on emissions, water usage, and transportation will be implemented. So that's we're kind of linking into that. And we're also saying it's probably going to take a while to put a rail plan together. So it's a kind of a realistic target date. But to be honest with you, I made it up. That was my thinking. And so that's what we want you to look at. Like, you picked up on that immediately. That was kind of there for someone to see. So what do we think of that? Just, okay? All right. All right, this is the dream of 30 minutes of an hour using Stanford, but you can see on this slide where New Haven is. And look, you only have 16 trains from New Haven. Okay, you have 45 from Stanford. All right, now the infrastructure issue. Let me go back. This rail system was built 100 years ago. We have 4 bridges on the New Haven line. This is the line from New York to Boston, serving 38 million riders a year. 4 of those bridges are 100 years old. And one of them gets stuck. This is extraordinary. These are the infrastructures, just real quick, you can look at it in the future. It's going to cost $3.6 billion just to bring this rail system up to a state of good repair. Think about the policy issue that a political culture allowed this kind of deterioration on one of the main area of its economic growth. Those bridges, 2 point something billion estimated. So this is the challenge. This is a huge challenge. This is just to bring it to a state of good repair, not to bring it 30 minutes to Manhattan. Okay? And that was done by the Regional Planning Association, which is in New York, so far from this. All right, there's the Norwalk Bridge. See the guys on the top? Last summer, they had to crank this closed. It got stuck. It was like mice with cheese. That's no joke. These guys have to go down here, and they literally had to hand crank this closed because it wouldn't close in the summer. I mean, this is America. This is Westport, for Christ's sake. How can this be? So I just wanted to say the Now, this is one real quick on the housing issue, transit-oriented development. What we're also proposing here is an economic backbone. That rail is the new economic backbone of Connecticut. And we're coupling rail with transit-oriented development. Around these train stations, we will build office as well as housing. So Stamford, 10,000 units of housing, mostly filled by young workers, is around the train station in Stamford. That did not exist 10 years ago. That's kind of, so housing and development around the train station. Yes, sir.
This is an element of your pitch that these cities sort of in the greater metropolitan area already have infrastructure and already could support a larger population than they presently have. So if that's the case, why build more housing?
Well, you mean bring up the people?
But you just said a moment ago that these cities already have infrastructure, already support a larger population. I would have read that.
Could have. Except that too
They're
far.
very different.
Bridgeport, yes. Bridgeport's a little bit too far to be a community from Manhattan. New Haven certainly is. I mean, President Yale talked about his spouse who commuted into New York City for 5 years and it took 2 hours each day. And after a while, after 5 years, you throw up your hand and put your hair out. It just isn't. How can I have a family? How can I have a life if I'm on the train 4 hours a day? It doesn't work. So yes, they're there, but the infrastructure is not up to speed, the quality you need, nor has the housing in these communities has deteriorated. They have become, as you know, in Connecticut, places for poor people only, and that's not acceptable. So how do you rebuild a middle class? How do you build a working class in cities that have been abandoned?
I guess what I'm asking, coming from a down level in Massachusetts, is do you really need to go and build new residences for wealthy commuters, or do you improve the already existing infrastructure just run that?
2 points. One, that's the assumption we want to test. I'm presenting you from a business council development point of view. I need someone like you to challenge me on that. Well, wait a minute, what about the grandma that lives on the east side of Bridgeport? Does she use a rat's ass about transportation to New York or Stanford? Or is getting to the hospital or the nursing home if she can't drive? And every mill town is not going to be redeveloped. But there will be nodes of development in communities that are underdeveloped today. And remember, the economic backbone of the country was built on rail, right? I mean, built on roads after the Second World War, Eisenhower. The question is, do we now begin to shift that? Look, we have a proposal from the government, $100 billion transportation plan for Connecticut. He wants to spend $7 billion on fixing the Nix-Mansfield water barrier. $7 billion. The Nix-Mansfield is where 84 and 8 come together. $7 billion. We are rebuilding LaGuardia for 4. We're rebuilding the Tappan Zee Bridge for 4. We're going to spend $7 billion? I mean, there's got to be a thought about the engineering of that. But also the issue, is the future more rail-oriented? Is the car still going to be the preeminent driver of economic growth? Or in the Northeast in particular, can rail play that role? A more balanced, not anti-car here, but a more balanced infrastructure system. I don't know the answer, that's the question. You raised the question, it's a good question. I need help with that.